I'm Wijs. I'm here on behalf of the European Data Portal and Support Center for Data Sharing. The European Data Portal is an EU initiative focused on supporting EU member states in publishing their open data and promoting open data's potential for reuse. And Support Center for Data Sharing is also an EU initiative that helps organizations, both public and private, in sharing data between them and offers support in terms of technical and legal issues. And today we're joined by Eva van Rooijen and Jasmin Kareem to talk about Check the Facts. This is a decision-making tool that they developed for students on the basis of open data. And in a minute, I would like to give the floor to you, and you can discuss the tool and you can show us. On a more general note, I would like to ask everyone to keep yourself on mute. And if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type them in chat. And we can address them either intermittently or at the end in a more dedicated Q&A. Also, this session will be recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel afterwards, so stay tuned for that. Eva, Jasmin, I would like to give the floor to you.
Thank you. I think I'll start with just a small introduction. So my name is Eva van Rooijen and I'm working as a data manager for the Dutch Open Data Portal. So we gather all the open data sets that are published by governmental institutions to sort of bring an overview of where people can find open data from government. And we realized that, this tool is basically brought on because data can be hard to interpret, and we'll get back to that later.
Yeah. And I should also introduce myself. I'm Jasmin Kareem. I'm currently a bachelor data science student at the Technical University of Eindhoven and Tilburg University. During the project, I was an intern at the Central Bureau of Statistics in the Netherlands. I'm currently not anymore, but during that time, it was really an initiative to look at what you can do with open data and sort of bring it together in a dashboard. It was very open for me, for my interpretation, to make of it what I want. And Check the Facts, the project I was working on was specifically about higher education, but you can also have Check the Facts on other topics. So we worked on Check the Facts higher education specifically. So we should talk about the original plan, because initially it was very broad. It was I was told, like, okay, we can have many stakeholders, it could be useful for policymakers. It could be, even give some sort of predictive use that, you could sort of see not only, what is in the data, but what could the data imply for what the user could do in the future. And also, I think a key element of it was using multiple data sources and bringing that together. And that was also a huge challenge, finding these sources. They're scattered online, but it was hard to find. And also to do that in a limited time frame. I had 6 months for my internship, so developing this tool was a real challenge. And of course, it was also a pilot project. It was the first Check the Facts project of its kind. So it really formed a basis for future Check the Facts projects. So that was basically original plan. It was very broad. Then I guess I can share my screen to sort of maybe already show you the application that I have. Yeah, okay. So, and I'll just talk over this and then I'll explain in detail what everything is. So first of all, when me and Eva started, as I said, it was very broad and we had to really focus on something. It couldn't just be, let's make an application for everyone that everyone can use and it's all about higher education. We really had to focus, okay, the user, who are we going to focus on? It can't be, we thought about, looking at policymakers, maybe can this application be useful for universities? But in the end, we chose students, and particularly students who are in high school, their last year of high school, and interested in getting information about going into higher education, and also bachelor students looking to either switch their studies or go into the master phase.
And maybe sorry, to clarify, like we in the beginning check the facts was more like, okay, so we have all these data sets and you can use data to check some facts, to get some information, to make an informed decision about anything basically. And there is such an overload of data available that it might become difficult if you have one specific decision in your own life and you want to use data, that it can be a bit too overwhelming to go through all kinds of files and analyze the data yourself. So that's what we also meant with all the kinds of options and stakeholders in the beginning. We really had to find one specific decision and then move on to finding the data set. So in this case, we chose like, okay, I want to go for a new study. And then at the next stage, we actually went into all the possible data sets. So that's also the reason why you can apply this, like this check the facts tool, for all kinds of other decisions as well, like buying a house, for example, or moving to another city, or all kinds of decisions. Yeah, and then you can.
Yeah. Was there a reason you chose to focus on the education sector specifically for this first Check the Facts pilot?
Well, the higher education subject was just brought to me by by the person I was working with at CBS. For me, the reason why I think it might have been, well, for me, it was easier, I guess, to work on something that was close to me. As an intern, I'm a student, so I could easily, you know, figure out what a user would want from such an application. It helped, I think, a lot. If it was something very unrelated, like, or something that was very maybe tricky, that I was maybe not, I haven't experienced in my life before, it might have been difficult, and I would have needed to maybe do more phases of interviewing people, what they want, and with the time frame, maybe that's why higher education was chosen, because it's maybe easier for the intern, for me, to work on it. So yeah, I think that's why.
And I also think it has a nice potential for example, from a European standpoint, like that you could have the information, you can gather the information for different schools, different universities, and bring it onto one tool, because per country you have all different prerequisites for study programs. And if you would be able to make one tool where you can have study choice selector for all these universities, I think that would be interesting. We will get back to that later as well, because we have,
might be a next one.
yeah, we have type mini version.
Yeah. So so then we found relevant data sets. I can show you a bit. We found data from Duo, from Openstreetmap, from CBS. It was really that took a while, because we also found, for example, a data set from Studiekoze 123, which is a website that currently exists for higher education purposes as well. It uses both open data and private data. So it was tricky to figure out, can we use this data set? Is this open data? That was a, you know, part of the challenge, using only open data. What can you create? And we had to also keep in mind, what are the user requirements? A student, and I did this through asking students as well, what do you want from such an application? And they, and I had to sort of find the intersection between what the user wanted and what is actually available to use. And in the end, we found that the Duo datasets and also some CBS datasets were really useful, which are the, you know, Duo is like the government organization within for higher education. Let's see. So then we found 3 areas that are, so from all these interviews with students, we found that there were mainly 3 areas that you could sort of 3 pillars you could put all their questions and interests in. One was student housing, which was really important when they're trying to make a decision on, where do you go to study, what do you want to study. Housing is a huge issue for them. We found that, of course, the education and everything that goes around it. So what is the study like, all that stuff. What are the statistics within the study? What can I know about the study? And also, what are the job market prospects, career opportunities after the study? These were, within the pillar of education. And then lastly, more general things such as geographic locations, and this is what we have here and here. Students wanted to know, okay, is there a bar in this? Are there lots of bars in the city? Is there lots to do? Can I go out a lot with friends? What's the connectivity like? If I want to live somewhere, is it close? Can I easily commute to university? That kind of stuff. This is all geographic data that you can find online as well. So these were sort of the three main ideas we had for it, and that's also what we based the application around. Let's see. Yeah, then also it took a while to, a large part of it was gaining feedback as well. So the initial version was quite basic, and part of the journey was that we asked people to evaluate. One of the ways we evaluated was through the data communities platform, which we got some feedback every now and then. We posted updates of this prototype and continuously received feedback, which was really great and helped us improve it to the state that it is now. So yeah,
lots of issues with like, for example, if you have a visualization of a data set and if you've been looking at the data for a long time, you think, oh, this is really clear. But then if you have put it on the forum, so you would put like, what do you think is more clear, A or B? And people can just vote or leave feedback. And then you notice that one map with everything is not the best option to show the data actually. Then we, for example, switched to these tabs you can see here in the study program, the job market, and the analytics page, to sort of tailor the tool to the phase of the decision students were in, for example. So in programs phase, you have a really, really general overview. For example, in this matrix, this table at the bottom, what study programs there actually are. And then the job market for one specific study or a few specific studies, what would be the effects or your chances on the job market. So you can kind of guide them through this decision-making process.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, maybe also now to explain a bit more in depth what everything is, because we gave a bit. Yeah, so the filtering aspect of it was super important. As you can see, like when I showed all the instellingsnaam, which is the universities, it's not really, you can't really see what's happening. So filters are super important. Were super important part of this application. If you only care about universities that have, let's say, technique as a student, you're a very technical student. Now you can already see that it's you can see at least the names of the universities and so forth. So if a student would like to filter on this, this is all from the data sets that we've combined, also with the years. And there's also an overview image with a stream plot that lets them sort of easily see how the numbers have changed over the years. And this was really utilizing what was in the data set, fully utilizing what we received from the data set. So that was that. Then, as Eva mentioned, we have the study programs table. You can print it, search for particular topics. Like I like to look for data science. And so I have all the rows with data science in it. I can see my study. Then the useful locations. This is just where your university is. This includes both the research universities and the applied science universities in the Netherlands. You can also search for a location. And also this is what I mentioned earlier, you know, students would like to know where the bus stops are, where the library is, maybe where a supermarket is, universities. And here they can look up the city they're interested in. Yeah, so that was this this tab. As you can see, there's also a matrix tab, which we never actually completed. And we'll talk about more about what that could mean for the future. But essentially, we wanted to add a Nordstrom matrix, which is essentially a prerequisites for each program. This data set does exist somewhere, I think, under the Federation of all universities in the Netherlands, where you can see the prerequisites for each program. So, for example, if you want to go from bachelor to master, this is where you can see it. But you could also do this for a high school, what kind of background you have in high school, which packages you have, and see for each university program, can I even go to this university? This is probably very useful information for students, so they don't have to go through lots of websites and just see one visualization.
I see. There's a question from the audience. Is it only for data from the Netherlands, or are you considering to do it in a wider scope or other member states?
Yeah, so initially, actually, so this is all just from the Netherlands. Initially, when this was brought up in the original plan, there was a lot of talk about, yeah, we could do this also for across the border. So there's a lot of Dutch students also study in Germany, or German students study in the Netherlands or in Belgium. So they thought they could, we could also expand this to other countries eventually. But yeah, because of the limited time frame, we focused mainly on the Netherlands, especially because the data sets would be different we would be working with. So we'd have to combine like different languages and different systems with different ways of doing things, which I think is doable, but it would have taken a lot more time. And I think that's something for the future.
Yeah, I also think that the whole process of choosing what we want to show and how we want to visualize the data and how you want to combine these three pillars of information, basically, that you want to know when you make this decision. So the housing, job market, the study availability. I think that whole process already took almost all the 6 months.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That once you have sort of this format, so we want to combine all this information, then a big challenge would be to get all the data. So, for example, just for Nordstrom matrix, like we just discussed, it's already difficult to get the data for the Dutch universities, actually, because it's so complicated. Like, you can enter the study program with this study, but you can also enter it with this study with these courses, and it becomes very tricky. So if we would find a way to get that data efficiently, then I think the tool would be really good to do this.
It's already a very good tool. It's super clear. I think it gives a lot of information as well. Jasmin, the reason you said filters were important is because if not, you get all of the data parsed into it, right? So it becomes not so visible. Yeah, okay. So it's just the amount of data that makes it hard. So pretty much everything's on there if you don't use filters.
Exactly.
You get information overload warning.
Yeah. Because when we asked people as an evaluation of this at the end, you know, did you learn something new? And, you know, there were some issues. So they, you know, like, for example, it's a prototype. This could be better. That could be better. But when I asked, did you learn something you didn't know before? I think almost everyone said yes. And they had never known that this data set even existed. So I think that's, first of all, they're not going to search for it because they don't know how to search for it. But also, even if they had it in front of them, I don't think they would have looked through it because all the information is just in a giant table and you can't really see anything. And I think data visualizations really help with the communication. I think the data exists. It's just about communicating it to people. And this is one way to do it.
Yeah, if you don't see it, you're not going to know it's there. I think, especially like having been a student in this country myself, I mean, it's a lot of navigating back and forth on what you need and what's out there. So this is a beautiful way to visualize it and make it a lot clearer. Do you see a lot of uptake from the tool, not so much for students, but for policymakers? I think you mentioned it in the beginning.
Yeah, so for that we have the analytics tab. It's just that it's also not the most developed part of the tool.
Yeah.
But we realized that all the data that is behind this app, like if you visualize it, then you can really help students make a decision because you visualize the data in an interpretable way. But the same data set is used for policy research. Like, for example, the number of students who are who subscribe to a study program. Well, when they introduced the new loan system in 2015, there was a big sort of debate about, oh, would that decrease the number of students? And actually, if you look at the data for the number of students registered per year, you can analyze that question and you can also visualize the results of that. So also another extension of this tool would be to also visualize the policy research from education data. So for example, this is just a minor example of the effect of the loan system, but a lot of research has been done on this data set, and we think that by incorporating the research also in the tool, you might have another sort of dimension that could be interesting as well.
So if you look at this figure, it seems like there's no effect of the loan system at all, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a shocking discovery.
Yeah, actually, there's been an increase. More people go to university, but yeah, that's also what we said. I think in this, like, you can't really. I think with someone with a background in statistics, you would know. You can't really imply anything from it because you don't really have any causal information here. So that's why, we never really made other plots because we were so focused on these study programs. But you could do some sort of analysis and sort of show, do an investigation on how to best answer this question and what might have caused this increase if it's not the loan system changing.
Jasmin, you showed so on the full overview of the dashboard sort of view, at the bottom you said you also monitor job opportunities.
Yeah, that's
how does that work?
So the job opportunities we have here in this tab actually recently added it. This wasn't in the previous version, which I showed in January. But yeah, I just used CBS data. It had the same. So what was nice was that it had the same, for example, CLOHO code, which is the like area of study, which you also find here as well in this data set from Duo. And in this way, you could also look, this is per study richting, you could have different options. But in this way, you could sort of connect that data set with this one, showing maybe not per study program, but per area of study, what the job, how many people graduated from this job and how many from this, how many people got a job within, let's say, a month, how many people got a job within 2 months from these different backgrounds, and also per year you could see the progression. I think this plot I would still need to further develop because I had some ideas, but because I don't work at CBS anymore, I'm not really actively working on it now. But in this way, you can really you can see how it would be possible to connect through the CROHO code the Duo dataset, which is about individual programs, and the CBS dataset about job market opportunities.
What did you find to be the biggest challenge in developing this this dashboard?
There were many challenges. I think it was really just because I was very normally when you do these kinds of projects, you do them in a team setting, and you have like every week, you have a meeting, and then everyone sort of goes their own way and comes back at the end of the week. We didn't really have a team. It was really me and Eva working on it, and me doing the developing, Eva really looking at the communication aspect of it and how to best sort of package this. And that was really hard doing it, I think, just with the two of us and doing it online and in the pandemic, not being able to go in person. That was really difficult. And I think the second thing that was also super difficult was finding data. Finding data was surprisingly very, very difficult. Usually in my previous projects, someone would just give me a data set and tell me to work with it. Now I really, I got some indications like, oh, you could go here and you can go there, but it was very open, and the difficulty was going through each and every data set and figuring out how much value can this data set add. Some data sets are very simple and very generalized, so you can't really connect it with other data sets you have, and there's not really any way to connect those data sets and take value from it in this particular setting. So that was really difficult, finding data sets that can be combined and are relevant to the user. That took probably the most time, even more than developing the app.
Because you use CBS data and Duo data, right?
Yeah, I used Duo data. So this is the inschrijvingen for WO. This is the write-ins for WO. They had more data sets. There were slight differences between them, but I just decided on this one between 2015 and 2019. Mm-hmm. Then I have the addresses of the universities and CBS data for labor market position. Before I had the labor market position, I also used Wijken en Buurten for student housing. Unfortunately, there was that was sort of a limitation of this project, was that student housing data is awfully difficult to find because it's you have general reports about student housing, but you don't actually have, and you have data on housing in general, like with Wijken en Buurten, which is doesn't really discriminate between a normal resident and a student resident. But I found that student housing data is difficult because in order to differentiate between a normal citizen and a student citizen, you need to go through the personal data of everyone and then making an open data set from that to differentiate between the two people. You would need to go to each person's like BSN and so that would be difficult to make into an open data set, I think, or not necessarily difficult, but it would require an effort. And also it's difficult to identify where students are living because students don't always tell the government where they're living. Sometimes, they are still written in with their parents, but they have a room somewhere. So that was really tricky. But that's fine. I then replaced it with the labor market position data set, which I think has equal value. And hopefully in the future, more student housing data becomes available. I also use, by the way, Openstreetmap, which is awesome. It's not government made, but it's open source, and I think it could be useful for everyone in an open data project.
Yeah, tying into that open source aspect, is this open source? Can people improve on the code? Can they add stuff?
Yeah, so the code for this is actually on my GitHub, which I have here. I still need to update it to the most recent version, yeah, I think they can do what they want with my code. I'm not sure. So it's on my GitHub. I don't know where CBS or data.europa.eu will have it. However, we do have a page on data communities where you can see the Shiny app. This was written, by the way, in our Shiny. And hopefully there's a way that we can communicate over it. There's also a forum here. This is also where we got some feedback, where people can comment and give suggestions, but also maybe upload code.
Thank you for showing that. Do you see any other applications in light of this in the future, apart from like making it European and checking higher education across the board? Do you also see maybe applications in health, something similar but COVID related perhaps?
Yeah, I do, definitely. What I do have, though, that I learned from this experience, especially when we're talking about healthcare, open data by nature is, of course, open. You can't have something personal, and medical data, of course, can be very personal. What I noticed as well as something students wanted was, I want to know about student personal experiences. So that in nature, you can't really, with open data, that unless the person themselves would post it, you can't have a personal experience of someone. I think with healthcare, you do have open data sets, though, that are, for example, mental health. I think there's a lot of mental health surveys now in times of COVID that I saw, where you could really find useful applications. So I do think this can be a sort of basis, a sort of proof of concept for future open data, open source applications that want to know, okay, what are the limitations, first of all, of doing something like this? What can you do, but also what is possible? And I hope this will give people in the future ideas on what to do with open data.
Yeah, this is definitely a great example. I hope this can inspire others to do similar things. I would like to, as we have 10 minutes left in our meeting, I would like to open the floor to the audience to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
You can either raise your hand, type in chat, or just unmute yourself and start talking.
So just share the link just for after the podcast if people want to review the code. We'll put it on GitHub and make sure that it's, and leave your feedback, improve the code. We'll have to figure out a way, because especially if we want to take this broader than just higher education. Also feel free to suggest a topic or a decision where people can use data. And you're like, hey, this actually could be cool to apply to that part as well. Then we can do it.
What is next for both of you right now? So as I understand, Jasmin, you no longer work at CBS, but what is next in your funnel following this great application?
Well, I actually just started an internship at Microsoft. So I'm in my last year of my bachelor, and I wanted to learn as much as I can, sort of when I can, and I'll see how that goes. So that I'm quite open about my future, and I'll go where whatever happens, so to speak. But I do still want to do a master after this. I'm not sure where yet, but that's sort of my goals. And I really liked doing a project even though this was for CBS and for COPE. I also felt it was for me, like, oh, this is my project. So I really like that. I'd like to do more projects like this in the future.
Gianfranco, go ahead.
Thanks first of all for being with us today as well. I had the privilege to see the app in a preview back in January, so I'm very glad to see how it has, let's say, fixed the sharp corners, complemented what was missing, and so on. And I wanted to build on a question that Immaculata from the Publications Office made earlier about exporting the project or make it reusable across European Union. And again, without asking you to do the work for free, I wanted to remind you that there is something called the EU Datathon, that is a sort of a competition from the Publications Office for data-related projects, prototype, inventions, ideas. And if you don't want to do it in your spare time, you may do it as an application to that. And that may be quite a nice way to invest more in this, and make it portable, and potentially give it in the hands of the Commission for further maintenance, perhaps, if you like. I don't know how easy it is. Actually, this is a good question for Eva, perhaps. How easy it is to find opportunities to collaborate internationally when you have in your hands a prototype or a product like this that could work for others as well?
Yeah, good question. No, I really think that these tools, once you have sort of the layout of the tool, so that indeed was something we spent a lot of time about, like, okay, if you have it on the left, the sidebar, and then you filter, and then you move sort of through the screen, how can you sort of approximate the actual decision? But then once you have that, it doesn't matter if you have students from Belgium or the Netherlands or France or whatever. It's just the problem of getting the correct data. I think that will be the biggest challenge. So we'll have to contact either data portals, because I saw that quite a lot of European countries have their own data portal, so they probably have the similar data sets. It's just that Duo then is really a Dutch institution, and you probably have to find the French version of Duo, for example, to get the same data. But yeah, I really think it would be cool to continue the project.
Or you may crowdsource the contribution. So because we always think from the idea of top-down. Perhaps in your case, you work for government, so I need to find the data. I need to go and knock on 100 doors to find something.
I thought maybe for example, the Doorstroom matrix, we need data on, okay, if I have this study, can I then also attend this master's, for example, if I have this background? But if you would have a general form where universities can just submit their data and their prerequisites, and then it will be updated, I haven't thought about like if it's the most valid way, but in my opinion, it would be the most efficient way, because then slowly but surely you just build this tool, and then if it's not true, like if somebody runs into something that it says that they can actually enter the master, and then they get an email like you're not applicable, then well,
that would be an interesting one. It's a classic example of someone ending up into a ditch following GPS instruction. You told me to study, I don't know, the autonomy of frogs, and now I'm without a job.
Exactly, like your tool told me to do this study and told me that I was applicable, and now it's really hard and I wasn't actually applicable, so your fault.
So I did not plan for this, but actually it's an interesting aspect you touched there, because the more we open, let's say, calling it a product feels strange, but let's say a product like this to contributors of data, the more we may wonder about the liability of it. So are we providing advice? Are we making it very clear that the data does not come always from CBS, but perhaps from independent sources? So instinctively, and I'm talking as an individual here, not as as someone in the team for the European Data Portal, I would say that it can be managed. Perhaps even just visually warning that when, for example, imagine this diagram we have on screen now, if it was including also data that was crowdsourced, it may simply have a disclaimer of some kind saying these results, this forecast, these numbers come from also data volunteered by, say, someone, and click here to see the contributors. I would prefer the data to go out rather than, let's say, losing an opportunity because we cannot find an official source, but that's me.
I agree, actually. Yeah, I can see that. You could probably, as long as you communicated effectively to the user that what the source is and how much they should take it seriously, so to speak, and how it's not a tool that tells you what to do. It's a tool that informs you a little bit better, hopefully.
That's, I think, also the biggest challenge with communication of data. It's like, okay, so we have actually, on one end, you should say, okay, we have all kinds of open data sets that are about education. So if you want to make a decision about your education, use the data. Well, that's not really available. That's not really easy for people to do. So that's why we make this application to make the data more interpretable. But then the other end would be that it would be sort of a study advisor robot person, and that would not be good, I think. I think you would really have to stick to the data, visualize it, and it's the same with the analytics step. Like, we can visualize the graph of the number of students before and after the loan system. But then the final conclusion is not really a data visualization. Then you would need to have a model. And if you have a proper model, if you know which models are applicable to answer such a question, then you can have a discussion, for example, about it. But that was a big, I think, unanswered question of this project in the end. Like, where is the line between presenting information visually and drawing conclusions from the data.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's a very good point. I mean, sometimes we call it the difference between data-driven decisions and data-informed decision. And sometimes in industry, we see a bit too much, let's say, bias towards the first, because we expect this kind of magical AI taking decision for you and then I'm done, right?
yeah.
Again, as a humanist, I don't know. I have a feeling that this is what you're saying. Is decisions like that are so much impactful on a life that you want to be as informed as possible, but ultimately you probably don't want a machine to take a decision for you.
Because you cannot really quantify the optimization criterion, sort of like if you have kind of a simple, well, maybe not simple, but if you have a process where you're really clear on the restrictions and the optimization goal, then you might use a model or like optimization algorithm to say, okay, then I have to do A or B. But for such a decision as your study and the place where you want to study and the people with whom you will be studying, for example, it becomes way too complicated. So to have some information from data is helpful, and then there's also a big part that's just
yeah. I agree. Yeah, completely. Yeah, and that's also part of, I think, part of the personal experiences of students. That's what I remember clearly from what people told me is like, yeah, when you think about where you want to study, it's a lot of it is very personal, personally motivated, and also what you hear from, let's say, an aunt who studied there or a friend who studied there. That kind of information, you can't really capture that in open data. Well, I at least I don't know how to.
Not yet.
So, maybe you can. I just don't know how to. But yeah. So that part, unless there's some open source way where people can share their experiences, you don't really. You won't be able to get the full picture of the decision-making process.
Yeah, and again we go back to the crowdsource element of it that can be managed, I believe, but yeah, but it's a complement. It's a natural complement of everything you described, and I believe there is more work coming also from the European Data Portal in this space. I don't think we can talk about this yet, but over the next 6 years there will be also some of these elements. And also in the team we have Professor Elena Simper, probably I said it wrong, but Simper, who for many years has been researching how to crowdsource data. So that actually is a meta suggestion for my team in the call. Perhaps we can actually invite her to talk about that specific part of research. So how to make crowdsourced data credible. And you won't believe there are actually statistical methods just for that were developed for social sciences. So how can you trust, say, a series of people being interviewed on a topic because they may naturally lie or being wrong. There are statistical methods to actually filter out the bias, the mistake, and so on. That's quite cool.
That's interesting. Yeah, that could be used definitely in the future if it's for such projects.
Okay, thank you.
Jasmin, Eva, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today and presenting the tool. I think it was super interesting. I'm very glad, very happy to have hosted you. The recording will be on YouTube afterwards. I will let you know, but it will also be promoted on our Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter channel, so you can stay tuned for that. I would like to thank the audience as well for attending today and asking questions, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.